From first function to second function as well as from second function to first function, arguments are passing here. Arguments is nothing but values, or we say it as parameters. There is no values are passing from one program to another program, as well as from sub-program to main program also. No values or arguments or parameters are passing here. Whatever value we are passing for P, T, R, that will take in the sub-program and it will work on that. That is P into T into R, whole thing divided by 100. Welcome back to one and all. Myself, Vasanta, lecturer in computer science, Vidhyaashram, Pre-University College, Temple of Excellence, Mysore. Today, we are going to start with third session of user-defined functions chapter. Whereas in the previous session, you have studied regarding what do you mean by calling a function, how to invoke a function, then main function, returning a value, after calculation in the program, especially in the functions, how values are returned, then function prototype, that is after processing, especially here in the program, main program, before using that function, we have to declare what is the function name, what is the return type specifier here, then how many arguments are there, which data type it is, that is nothing but function prototype, then types of arguments. When they come on types of argument, actual argument as well as formal argument. Regarding that, you have studied. Whereas on today's class, you will come to know regarding types of functions. When they come on functions, there are two types. There one is user-defined function and one more is built-in functions. Or we say that library functions. Whereas in library functions, there the functions are already defined, it's predefined, and we are using the functionalities. But when they come on user-defined function, there the functions are defined or created by the user itself. When they come on types of user-defined functions, under that functions with no arguments and no return value. In the functions, we are not passing any argument, and in the subprogram also we are not passing any arguments. Then functions with arguments and with no return value. From one function to another function, we are passing the argument, but from second function to first function, we are not passing any arguments. Functions with no arguments and with return value. It means that here from function 1, we are not passing any arguments, but from function 2, we are returning the value. Then fourth one is functions with arguments and with return value. From first function to second function as well as from second function to first function, arguments are passing here. Arguments is nothing but values, or we say it as parameters. And the fifth one is recursive function. These are the 5 types of functions. When they come on types, first one, functions with no argument and no return type values. Functions with arguments and with no return values. And the third one is functions with no arguments and with return values. The fourth one is functions with arguments and with return value. And the last one is recursive function. These are the 5 types of functions. Now, one by one we'll discuss. First, we'll discuss the first one, functions with no arguments and no return values. Functions with no argument and no return value. What do you mean by this? Consider we have one main program and one more I am going to call it as sub-program. This is also function, this one also function. Whereas in the main program, I used to call it as calling function, and the sub-program I am going to call it as called function. Whereas functions with no argument means no values are passing. There is no values are passing from main program to sub-program. And no return value, it means that no values are passing here. No values are passing after calculation in the sub-program. That is nothing but functions with no argument and no return value. In this method, simply perform independent task. There is no values are passing from one program to another program, as well as from sub-program to main program also, no values or arguments or parameters are passing here. The function does not receive or send any arguments here. If you observe the general format, here we have void. Void means here There is no values are returning here. After calculation in the subprogram, no values are passing here. Then we have to write function name. Here empty parenthesis we will write. It means that no values are passing from main program to subprogram here. No values, especially here, no values are passing from subprogram to, or we say that from main program to subprogram as well as from subprogram to main program. Then statements here we have to write. It means that no values are passing as well as no values are also returning here. If you observe the example, void here we are written. In this case, there is no values are returning here, and the function name here we are given as sum, and empty parenthesis, it means that no arguments are passing here. In this we have statements. We will declare int sum, then sum equals x plus y plus z. We are calculating sum. Then afterwards we are displaying the sum value, that is sum equals some value we are displaying. Then we are closing this function. It means that here no values are passing from subprogram to main program as well as no values are passing from main program to subprogram. This is nothing but functions with no arguments and no return value. Next, we'll move on to the next one, that is functions with arguments and no return values. What do you mean by that? Consider we have one main program and one more is subprogram. Here functions with arguments means from main program to subprogram arguments are passing. For example, here I am to take A and B are the values which we are passing. For example, it means that from main program to subprogram we are passing the values and no return value. From subprogram to main program, no values are passing. After calculation, no result are transferring from subprogram to main program. That is nothing but functions with arguments and no return value. Values are not returning here. In this type of function, the first function calls the second function. For example, main program calls the second program by passing some arguments to the second function. Arguments is nothing but parameters, values. But no values is sent back to the first function. After calculation in the subprogram, no values are transferring here. If you observe the syntax here, we have written void. It means that after calculation in the subprogram, no values are transferring here. Then function name, inside the bracket we have arguments. If you observe the previous case here, empty brackets we are written. It means that no arguments are passing from main program to subprogram. Whereas here from main program to subprogram, arguments are passing. Then inside the flower bracket you have to write all the statements. Whichever statement you want, you can write all the statements. If you observe the example, here we have void. It means that no values are returning here. Then the function name we are given as sum. And here we are given three arguments x, y, z. All the three arguments of type integer. These are the values which are passing from main program to subprogram or from function 1 to function 2. But here void we are written. It means that no values are returning. After calculation, no values are passing from function 2 to function 1 or subprogram to main program. Then here inside the bracket, we will write all the statement. Here we are declared int sum. Then x, y, z are the values which are coming from the main program. That I will do addition of these three numbers, x plus y plus z. Then we will display the value sum equals sum. Then afterwards we will close this bracket. It means that here we can able to pass the values from function 1. I am going to call it as this is function 1 and this is function 2. We can able to pass the values here from function 1 to function 2, but after calculation no values are passing. If there is a values are passing, then we are using the keyword return. But here if you observe, we are not using any word keyword like return. It means that no values are passing from subprogram to main program here. This is regarding functions with arguments and no return value. Next, we will move on to the next one, functions with no arguments. Functions with no arguments and with return value. It means that after calculation in the function 2, it will generate the result to the main program here. For example, we have one main program. This I'm going to call it as function 1, and one more program called it as subprogram. This I'm going to call it as function 2. Functions with no arguments means no values are passing. There is no values are passing from function 1 to function 2 or from main program to subprogram. Functions with no argument and with return value. It means that after calculation in the subprogram, it will generate the value, results. Some values are generating here. For example, C is the value here we have calculated that will move from function 2 to function 1. That is nothing but functions with no arguments and with return value. After calculation, it will return value. It will send back some values after calculation. That is, here it may be A, B, C, anything we can able to set. But here you have to mention which type of values we are sending, whether it's an integer value or character or float, that you have to mention. If you observe the syntax, return type, first you have to write. It means that after calculation, which type of value you want to generate, whether it may be integer format or it may be float format or it may be character format, which format we are sending the data result to the main program. That is return type. Then you have to write the function name. But here, while writing, empty brackets were written. It means that no values are passing here from the main program to subprogram. Then inside the bracket, here we'll write the statements. Then here we are using the keyword return. It means that after calculation, this is the value we will return to the main program. Then we'll close the function here. If you observe the example, here we are given int. The return type is int. It means that after calculation, it will generate the result in integer format and the function name here we are given as greatest. And here empty bracket, it means that we are not passing any values here. But after calculation, it has to generate the result of type integer format. In this, we are given the condition if A is greater than B. Then here, don't put any semicolon because here it is a condition. Then it will return the value A. Then else returns B here. Then we'll close this function. It means that here if you have any condition, you are not supposed to put any semicolon. If you don't have any conditions, then you have to put semicolon here. Then if you observe here, after calculation, we have to generate the result of type integer format, and here no values are passing from main program to subprogram. That is regarding functions with no argument and with return value. In this method, function receives no arguments but returns a values here. The subfunction will not going to receive any values. It will not receives any values, but subfunction has to pass the arguments here. Next one, we will move on to the next one, that is functions with argument and with a return value. What do you mean by this? Functions with arguments and with return value. Consider we have one main program here and one more is subprogram. This I am going to call it as F1 and this I am going to call it as F2. Here, functions with arguments means from main program to subprogram, we can able to pass the arguments. Any values we can able to send, A, B, C, anything you can able to send here. Any values, any arguments, any parameters can be sent here. And with return value, after calculation in the function 2, it will generate the result to the main program where it may be C, D, anything. It means that after calculation also, it has to generate the result to the main program. That is nothing but functions with argument and with return value. It means that from both the side, values are passing. From main program to subprogram also, we can able to pass the arguments, as well as from subprogram, after calculation, we can able to send the result to the main program here. That is nothing but functions with argument and with return value. In this method, the function receives some arguments and returns a value also. Receives the values as well as returns the value also. If you observe the syntax here, return type, after calculation, which type of value we have to generate? Return type, then function name, and inside the bracket, you have to write the argument list. Which are the arguments, which are the values we are sending from main program to sub-program. And here, after calculation, which type of value we are generating. Whereas statements, then return values, here you have to write, and here you have to close the function. And in the example, if you observe, here we are given as float. What do you mean by this float? After calculation in this subprogram, the result we want to generate in float format, where it may be integer format, or it may be float format, or it may be character format. Whichever format you want, you can able to generate here. That is nothing but return type specifier. Return, here we are given as float. Then function name we are given as interest, and here we are passing 3 arguments from main program to subprogram, or from function 1 to function 2. Which are that arguments? P, T, R are the arguments, and here we are given P of type float, T of type float, and R also of type float format. Which type of value it is, which are the values, as well as which type of value we are passing. It means that after calculation, it has to generate the result float format, and in the main program, we are getting 3 arguments, all the 3 arguments of type float format here. Then here we are finding the simple interest, that is simple interest equals PTR whole thing divided by 100. Whatever value we are passing for P, T, R, that will take in the subprogram, and it will works on that. That is P into T into R whole thing divided by 100. Then after calculation, this SI, that is of type float format, that result will go back from function 2 to function 1. Now is it clear? This is regarding functions with arguments and with return value. This is the 4th type. And the next one, that is the last one, the recursive function. What do you mean by this recursive function? A recursive function is nothing but repetition of some statements, some functions again and again. Repeatedly, that function will execute again and again automatically. That can be called as a recursive function. When we come on types of user-defined function, I told you 5 types. Functions with no argument, with return value, functions with argument, with return value, all the types. But the last one is recursive function. On this, recursive function is a function that calls itself. By itself, it will call the functions again and again. The process of calling function by itself is called as recursive function or recursion function also we can say. If we observe the general format, here return type we are given, that means after calculations which type of value we want to generate. Then function name, inside the bracket we have argument list. Here we have to write the statements, return function name. Once again we are given the same function name here. It means that this will returns once again, execute again and again this function, whichever function we are given with argument. And then here we are closing this function. From that you come to know that after calculation on this function, this statement, especially this function, will execute again and again. Now is it clear? This is the major concept here studied, that is different types of functions, especially user-defined function. Next class, you will come to know regarding how to invoke a function, especially by call by value, call by reference, as well as call by pointer. When you come on call by value, here the main program will send the address where exactly the data is present. The data itself is going to give, and the subprogram will take the copy of the data and it works on that. But when you come on call by reference, the main program will send the address of the data, and subprogram will take the data from that address only and it will works on that. Regarding that, you will come to know in the next session. Thank you for all of you.